Loveche. Ah, President of the Infrastructure Unlimited. Welcome. Up to you guys to decide who wants to go first.
Madam Chair, it's all right. I have no problem in going first.
Okay, thank you.
Like I said, my name is Frank Garcia. I'm chairman of the New York State Coalition of Hispanic Chambers. I represent 26 chambers in the state of New York, 80,000 members. I'm also have two companies I own who was in the South Bronx. I just merged with another Asian MBE company, Chinese owned, and just moved my operations totally to Wall Street. I was newly elected as chairman of the National Association of Latino State Chambers, representing 80% of the chambers, Hispanic chambers in the United States. So I just wanted to clarify today, I'm here representing the New York State Chamber, not the national, but it's the same issues that my counterparts have in California and Texas and here in New York. I remember 3 years ago, Senator Sanders came to one of our events at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had 85 Hispanic businesses and minority African American businesses, and we tried to get the major banks in. They all said no. And so we only had one bank, Spring Bank, who's still operation in the South Bronx. And I invited Pat's Economic Development that's he just left and didn't show up. And you remember that. So for him to say here that they're loaning to my members, that's not true. And the time they did, they had a Hispanic gentleman who's Puerto Rican who used to work for this organization that spoke before, now is at the 10,000 small business. So I would like to know how many minorities that he's got out there doing outreach. None. A year ago, I was at the Christmas party for the chamber that I founded, the Bronx Hispanic Chamber, with Bishop Ebony Kirkland. And they said they wanted to work with us and all. I set up a meeting, never happened, in my office in Wall Street. And so I hear all these numbers about Hispanics getting contracts and getting access to capital. That's not true. As the person representing Hispanic businesses, and Sandra knows me very well, and the person that fights for the MBE community in New York State, I don't see it. The banks are not lending. Wells Fargo has given millions and millions of dollars to the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and that has not trickled down to the local, when it comes to access to capital. They train the chambers how to be better presidents. We don't need that. We need the banks to fund our small minority companies and doing training. I asked the gentleman in Pat's organization to fund $500 to get the local banks to do a financial literacy class in Spanish and English with all the consul generals of Latin America, and I was denied. So the banks are willing to take our money, but they're not willing to invest in the community. And so as someone that used to have a manufacturing plant in the Bronx and I had to close it down and move to Wall Street, I have more opportunities now being in the Wall Street area than I had in the Bronx. And my business was in Brooklyn at one time, never had those opportunities. So you're saying that we have to bring minority businesses into Wall Street to be able to get access to capital. I'm here to support the Black Institute and some of the reports that they have given out. I'm very disturbed on some of the testimony that I hear today. I know as an advocate, it's not true. And so we need the Banking Senate Committee to support the local advocates, do more outreach. There's an MBE Capital, before I end, MBE Capital, that they're the ones that are lending to my members. Why? Because they understand the minority community. We have a 13-year-old young person that just got access to capital for a contract with Macy's. If we're able to get someone 13 years old who has anti-bullying clothing line, why can't we get for an MBE? And so that is my frustration. That's the members. I represent the Women's Chamber. Our women are not getting you know that, Senator, they're not getting access to capital. So how can we, as small business, be able to work with you to be able to force the banks to finally, they're willing to open our accounts. The chamber is with Wells Fargo, but they don't come back and invest back in the community. And so I would like to see more transparency and also more lending that advocates like Kenya Brew from the Women's Chamber is lending through private money, corporate money, going back into the community and lending $50,000 to $80,000. I don't see other, and lending to women-owned businesses that are startups in construction and other. That's the type of programs we need. Some of the programs that have been funded through the state are not coming down to our membership. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see more funding like Bert is talking about. 1% from the state pension and from the city pension go back into funding minorities, where we have minorities that sit on that board. That's another question. When Senator asked them, I've asked them 1,000 times for 3 years since I've been dealing with them, why they don't have minorities on the board. We can't find them. I'll give them a list. So I've never been able to sit down with Pat. He was here. He knows my frustration with his organization because I've said it publicly with other agencies. But I asked the Senate Committee on Banking to help us push the banks to do once a year with your committee, an MBE banking committee, where I could have my members come in and in front of, because they'll do it in front of you, they'll say, when they leave, they forget about the community. They'll take our accounts and open the bank accounts, but they will not give back to the community. Mm-hmm. So anything you could do to work with us, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Hold on, let's listen and then we'll take testimony. Gloria Lavetti.
Thank you, Senators, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. And I would also like to express my gratitude to the Black Institute for providing me with the opportunity to speak on behalf of women businesses. When I was asked by the Black Institute to relate my experiences with starting my business, I, as a woman, immediately thought of the most daunting problem I face. What will I wear? The solution to this problem brought me to Nordstrom's at the Westchester Mall, where I was helped by a lovely, seemingly overqualified sales associate named Evangeline. In order to help me, she asked me, "What occasion are you shopping for?" I answered, "I have been asked to speak in front of the New York State Senate." After Evangeline helped me with the purchase of a suit, she asked me the subject matter of my speech. And I told her the lack of capital and credit for women and minority-owned businesses. She said to me, I was the owner of a landscape design company and I had no access to a loan, so I had to self-finance. By the way, Evangeline is also a member of the untapped minority women entrepreneurial sector of our economy. Unfortunately, Evangeline had to sell her business because without access to credit and capital, it proved to be too overwhelming, especially when she had to wait 120 days, sometimes more, to be paid. Unfortunately, Evangeline's story is not uncommon when it comes to small, minority, and women-owned businesses. Most businesses need access to bank lines of credit to help them even out the rough patches while trying to finance their projects. While larger businesses have access to this capital, small businesses, in particular women and minority-owned businesses, are left out in the cold. The experiences I have had with my startup are much the same, which is why I jumped at this opportunity to shine a light on this problem. And I take this problem very seriously. I stand before you to speak on behalf of minorities and women. We're currently in the midst of struggling to start their businesses, and perhaps more importantly, those who have already lost their struggle as their businesses have failed due to lack of access to credit and capital. First, let me tell you a little bit about my startup business. In early April 2015, I started my business, convincing both my brothers to join me. I am the 51% owner, and my two brothers each own 24.5%. I'm the entrepreneur of the bunch, and I have a BS in Business Management from Clarkson University. I am also eligible to sit for the CPA exam, although I never has, as I never wanted to be a public accountant. My dream was to start a business with my two brothers. Prior to this, I had cut my teeth on Wall Street, as my first job was with Prudential Securities, and I gained further corporate finance experience at a few other multinational firms. Eventually, I found my way into the construction businesses started by my father. I was the corporate accountant, the corporate controller, and then the corporate treasurer of his businesses before leaving to start my own. In all, I have approximately 20 years of construction business experience in a multi-state environment. My startup business is named Infrastructure Unlimited, Inc., and our area of specialty is heavy highway construction, specifically bridge, railroad track, and utility electrical power line remediation and installation. My brother JJ is a field superintendent and has close to 40 years of field labor and project management experience, as well as experience managing construction equipment. My brother Stuart is a professional engineer and a professional surveyor with their engineering degree from the University of Akron. He has more than 30 years experience as a civil professional engineer and a construction project manager. He also was a city engineer for North Ridgeville, Ohio, and more recently the director of public service for Seven Hills, Ohio. Together, our collective skill sets cover the entire spectrum of the construction business cycle. In fact, the travel security company said that we had the best resumes they'd ever seen, and the reason they were considering the prospect of bonding us was because I had an accounting background and extensive business management experience. Apparently, the surety companies have found that companies with corporate leaders who came out of the field and project side of the business were not as likely to survive, as business health is predicated upon effective business administration and management. Regardless, our skills cover all the bases, and our resumes are quite extensive, so failure will not be an issue. I formulated a well-thought-out business plan and proceeded to acquire insurance, bonding, and a business loan. Since my brother Stuart was very skilled at bidding projects in Ohio, I decided it would be best to acquire our first few projects in Ohio, where he was most experienced, in order to build our balance sheet before we sought projects in New York State. I chose Chase to be our bank, as they had branches in New York, where I live, and Ohio, where Stuart lives. At this time, I visited one of the great New York State small business development centers at SUNY Rockland, and I was helped by a wonderful advisor named Adi Israeli. He helped me with obtaining financing, and when I told him that I had deposited our startup capital in Chase Bank, he said that that was likely a mistake. I asked why, and he said they're not small business friendly. He said to give it a try though, but he has never met anyone that has had any success with them so far. Needless to say, Adi was correct, as they never called me back when I inquired several times about a loan for my startup. I didn't get a call back until I got financed through M&T Bank and asked to close my account. When they asked why I was closing it, I said it was because I wanted to put my money in a bank where they were willing to do business with me. I told them I had tried to get a loan through them, but I was never called back. It took several very time-consuming attempts to obtain a loan, which required filling out endless personal net worth statements for each owner, business application forms for the bank, and notarized affidavits. Each bank has its own set of requirements, all which are very laborious. Each time it's done in vain is a complete waste of time, and as you all know, time is money. I was finally able to get an SBA-backed loan through Jeff Warminski and Alicia Brockway at M&T Bank with the help of Adi Israeli at the Rockland SBDC. Fortunately, M&T Bank based their consideration upon the collective strength of our resumes, our network, and our credit rating. Although I was able to acquire a small loan for Infrastructure Unlimited, I was told by banking professionals that we should be grateful to have found financing at all. Apparently, these loans are seldom given out. In fact, a banking representative told me, according to his experience, loans are given to startup companies only once every 5 years. I found this fact to be quite startling. Acquiring this loan was very significant for my construction company, as it is a requirement of the surety company in order to be issued a bond. And having a bond means that our company is eligible to bid on state and federally funded projects. The size of our loan is fairly small when considering the type of work we do, especially since it was based on the collective network of my brothers and I. It is limited. Unfortunately, without this loan, Infrastructure Unlimited would be excluded from a large segment of the construction market. Needless to say, I'm very thankful to have received financing through M&T Bank. Finding a bonding company was not difficult, as there are many in the market. However, finding that would actually work with a startup business was quite difficult. They were always very impressed with our resumes, but few wanted to work with a startup company with no track record. We ended up finding a surety that would provide us with an SBA-backed bond, in which the SBA provides a federal guarantee to the surety to promote investment in small businesses. Unfortunately, the size of our bond was limited to $600,000. Although this may sound like a large amount to you, the size of the projects in which we are accustomed to completing are typically much higher than that, as we are skilled in more complicated projects, which have been in the $1 million to $70 million range. Initially, the surety allowed us to bid on more than one project at a time with no aggregate limit. However, a few weeks ago, they decided to limit our company to bid one project at a time, and if we are awarded a project, we will have to wait until we have completed 50% of the project to be allowed to bid again. Those who understand the construction business will realize this is a huge problem, as it will cause discontinuity in our backlog schedule, creating gaps between jobs where we will have to carry our workers or lose them to another contractor. Carrying workers will dramatically increase our overhead, something I have taken great pains to keep low, and actually set our business up to fail. I do not believe it is the intention of the SBA to cause businesses to fail, so this limitation is counterintuitive and harmful to small businesses. Since we have been limited to relatively small projects by our bonding and lending amounts, naturally I wanted to find a way to become a subcontractor to larger contracting companies, which would open up a greater segment of the market to my company. This is another area where being a startup company, especially a woman-owned business, puts you behind the 8 ball, because large contractors are not inclined to subcontract their projects out to startup businesses. This problem prompted me to become a certified disadvantaged business enterprise, which you all know is a DBE, which in theory is perfect for my business, as I am considered disadvantaged according to the federal government's criteria, and I'm quite sure I'm a woman. With my extensive resume, one would think I'm a shoo-in. The DBE program, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation's DBE website, and I quote, is designed to remedy ongoing discrimination and the effects of past discrimination in federally assisted highway, transit, airport, highway safety, financial assistance, transportation contracting markets nationwide. This helps disadvantaged small businesses by requiring a percentage of all federally funded projects to be allotted to certified DBE businesses. I decided to get certified through the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, as I felt it was a good fit because my brothers and I had been involved in projects of theirs in the past. For instance, when JJ and I worked for North Star Contracting, we were the subcontractor who finished the 1 in 9 subway lines project ahead of schedule for the Tully-Pegno joint venture. These were the subway lines that were destroyed in the attacks of 9/11. I took many hours to put together a certification package, which I began on November 24th, 2015. I had to fill out the application, get an affidavit of certification form notarized, provide reams of documentation, which included and are not limited to scanned copies of articles of incorporation, corporate bylaws, corporate minutes, shareholders agreements, bank signature cards, copies of stock certificates, stock ledgers, reviewed financial statements, 3 years of tax returns, loan agreements, bonding agreements, Ohio DOT pre-qualification certification, proof of ownership, canceled checks, equipment lists, resumes, asset transfer documentation. You get the idea of how laborious this was. And I submitted my finalized paperwork on December 11, 2015. As of today, I still haven't been approved. I called in February 2016 to inquire, and they said they had misplaced one of the original forms on one of their employees' desks, and now they have it and it'll be underway. After 5 months of waiting, I still heard nothing, so I inquired with a letter which went unanswered. At this time, I called my mentor, Adi Israeli, at the Rockland County SBDC to ask what I should do about the unanswered letter, inquiring about the status of my DBE application. He said he would reach out to them for me. I believe this prompted them to respond to me, which they did in the form of a letter, which asked questions that clearly indicated they had not reviewed my documentation. I took painstaking care to put together a clear package, and I added additional documentation like my business plan to further clarify the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey certification specialists. I answered their questions, one of which asked who would be in charge of the office in Ohio, and I answered with a notarized affidavit saying that I'm in charge. Even though my brother Stuart is an engineer and an estimator, I am ultimately responsible for his work product, as well as the work product of J.J. Lapise. When I called to check on the status of the unanswered questions, the certification manager at the Port Authority stated something about quote unquote Ohio, in which I had already provided an answer in the notarized affidavit. I called the U.S. Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. to ask an official in the DBE program about the regulations regarding office locations, and they said there were not any. A company can have locations in more than one state. It is clear to me that they are not actually reviewing my documentation, and someone like me with an extraordinarily strong resume is being passed over because they think I'm not in charge, because I'm a woman. I'm facing the same gender-based discrimination from them in which their program was designed to provide protection. I have also taken the time to attempt to become a certified minority women-owned business enterprise, MWBE, which I intended to submit again through the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The MWBE program is designed to help level the playing field for minority and women businesses by ensuring their ability to have access to state projects. Once a business is certified, prime contractors that intend to perform projects funded by the government must allot a certain percentage of their work to MWBE certified firms. This program has many of the same criteria as the DBE program, except that it requires the company has to be in business for 1 year. Upon filling out the online forms, it became apparent to me that entry into this program was even more impossible than entry into the DBE program. For each work type in which you're applying to be certified, you must provide 4 personal recommendations. Since I would be looking for certification in 3 work types, I need to provide 12 personal recommendations, which is more than daunting for a new company. It's impossible. I cannot utilize my 20 years of experience to satisfy these criteria. I would have to rely on projects that I have performed with my startup company, which in my line of work would likely take several years, if not longer. Infrastructure Unlimited Inc. already has been thoroughly vetted by the Ohio Department of Transportation as a certified pre-qualified contractor eligible to perform over $2 million worth of projects at a time. Unfortunately, according to MWBE or DBE programs, the pre-qualification is meaningless. One would think these programs were designed to help fledgling companies gain access to projects. Instead, they are missing the mark. as businesses would likely fold before qualifying for certification as a DBE or MWBE. Since I am a college graduate with an extensive background in business and corporate finance, I am well qualified to run a business, and with my particular experience, a construction business. If I am not qualified, who is? Can others, including perhaps more disadvantaged individuals, get fair treatment if I'm not getting it? I and my fellow minority and women businesses should be the target in which these women minority programs aim, and where banks and bonding companies should be reaching to tap into an emerging market. I wonder what would happen if the men presented my resume. Would the questions be the same? Or would those in banks and bonding companies and certifying organizations be asking the male version of me, what took you so long to start your business? If I am not capable of running a business or a construction company, who is? If I am not eligible for DBE certification, who is? If I am not eligible for an MWBE certification, who is? If I am not eligible for credit, who is? If I am not eligible for bonding, who is? If I am not eligible for the American dream, who is? Women and minorities are only asking to be treated fairly, and we need to make this happen now, in this generation. I am here to help open the doors and give a voice to those that came before me, that were unable to make it through this exhausting nature of the current inequitable system. And so those behind me do not have to stumble over the same obstacles I did. In order to start and manage an effective business, women and minorities need the same access to bonding, capital, credit as everyone else. The programs designed to help women and minorities need to be more accessible and available early on in the startup process. We cannot wait many months or years to be eligible for these programs, nor can we allow applications for these programs to languish in the system, as processing time for certification needs to be significantly reduced. Additionally, payment times from city, state, and federal entities need to be decreased, as it puts a tremendous financial strain on small businesses, particularly minority and women businesses, who do not have access to lines of credit, which might help mitigate temporary cash flow problems. If we make these changes, we will be helping women and minorities, as well as their families, the families of those they employ, their local communities, and the economy. This is the American dream. The world looks to the United States to set examples. In many ways, the crown jewel of the United States is New York State, as we are on the cutting edge in so many areas, be it fashion, finance, technology, social issues. I may be biased, but I feel New York State is the greatest state in the Union. I would like to see this state, my state, take the stage as a world leader regarding minority and women issues. Please help minorities and women who have been denied access to the American dream be included in the future. The world is watching. Let's lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Gardner.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Ron Gardner. I'm president of Gardner Business Services. We're an accounting and business consulting firm located here in the Capital District. I've been in business for a little over 25 years now. I lose track. But I'm also head of the new local chapter of AMNY, Association of Minority Enterprises of New York. So we're just starting here in Albany, this capital region. As I sit here and listen, to my counterparts here describe the challenges and disappointment, in dealing with the powers that be in terms of getting access to capital. It is a very real scenario. My background is accounting, and as an accountant and the CPA, we deal with this on a daily basis. Firms trying to get capital for projects, you know, business expansion on various levels. But rather than going into this a long list of horrors which I can give you, I can tell you how I've gone into banks and I could even name the banks. And you go in and you talk with the manager, you present the material and everything is in order. And then it's got to go to the next level outside of the bank that, you know, they don't have any relationship with the client or whatever, you know, no interaction. I was particularly impressed with our friend from NYBDC, and they talk about all the enormous programs and outreach efforts and, you know, those things. And, you know, as Mr. Garcia said, I would love to get his card in contact because I can give you 100 people right now that could certainly fit this bill here. So we're, there's a serious need here for capital, access to capital. Bonding is a tremendous problem. And outreach and technical assistance and, you know, and all those things, you know, sort of come into play. But there needs to be a mechanism in place for these institutions to reach out to these communities and reach out to these folks. As we start talking about minority firms, and I'm talking about people that, you know, look like, you know, me and others, you know, they're typically the ones that's trying to hire, you know, the young men and women in the community. Some of these communities we go in, you know, unemployment 20, 30%, you know, you hear about 5%, 3% or whatever, but the reality is when I'm going out there, I'm seeing, you know, young man after young man just standing on the corner with absolutely no direction, no opportunity to do anything. And you have contractors that I know that want to hire these folks, but we need to get them trained and prepared for the challenges, you know, of the job site. And there's no access to capital to give them that opportunity to do that, or put them in such a stringent way that when they go out there to get the opportunity, you know, it's such a stranglehold by not having access to the capital. So the access is really the absolute key here. If, you know, these folks are serious about opening up, you know, this dialogue and starting that conversation, we are ecstatic, you know, about this. But this is a very, very serious problem, and it's going to take some very, very serious actions and commitments across the board to deal with the multitude of challenges that are there. People are starving. People are giving up. There's a lack of hope. There's a lack of apathy. I mean, just across the board. And you know, so we need help. I think the enthusiasm and the, you know, the attitude and all that is in the community. Everybody is willing and ready to do this, but there are many, many pieces to this moving puzzle, and we need all the help and resources we can to bring this together.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. I wish Pat had stayed to listen to it, because on the one hand, we start the hearing with the description of a program which obviously was created for the express purpose of providing access to capital to small businesses, and particularly MWBEs. But it's almost as if they're operating in a parallel universe. So if you're lucky and you know about the programs and you're able to access them, it's great, it works for you. But it seems like there's a real you know, lack of coordination between the two, and that's certainly something that we need to look at. Mr. Garcia, you mentioned in your comments, I wrote myself alone here. So you represent the State Association of Latino State Chambers. How many?
Nationally.
National. So in New York State, how many?
In New York State, I represent 26 Hispanic chambers from Rochester, Buffalo, down. And nationally, I represent Texas, California. That's a separate organization.
Right, but let's just focus on New York. So there's 26 there's 26
local
Hispanic chambers of commerce in New York State,
and one woman chamber.
And one woman. Is she also Hispanic?
Yeah, but she caters to all women.
I'm just wondering, like, do we cross a few different? So of the 26 Hispanic chambers that are in your organization, do you know how many MWBEs in them were able to apply for capital through the New York State Banking Development Corporation? None. None. Not a single one? Is it
Not
because
even
they
one.
is it
And the
'cause-
ones they have been many, many years, like Gilbert, who rest in peace, who was the leader of the Hispanic Business Group, you know, and other organizations. I've tried to reach out to them. They have not, all they do is take pictures with me and my counterparts from the Bronx Hispanic Chamber, and that's it. When you call them, they don't, you know, I want access to capital for my
So-
members. This makes it easy.
So,
For me, I'd rather go to MBE Capital, that's a minority-owned capital company who's funded by corporate America, than supposedly something that's funded by the banks to help us, that really is just there as status quo.
so how many loans are being made through MBE Capital to members of your association?